Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well,
Good.
and I think we're going to have a little bit of good news today, somewhere along the way.
Somewhere there will be.
Maybe I want to start off with a little bit more information. You know, I think you have heard about this scandal, the Russiagate scandal.
Yeah.
It sort of started in about, before the last election. It's been ongoing. And, of course, it's been reported pretty well, but the reports that we heard for 3 years was against Trump, so it was all a bunch of lies that most people agree to now. But there was some information that was finally released. It was the director of national intelligence, Ratcliffe, now released a lot of information, and evidently this guy Brannon, he must have been up to some dirty tricks, and that's making it politely. But evidently his notes and evidence to show that he and Hillary were colluding to deliberately hurt the president, and based on lies, not on facts. So this is broken out, and of course the left will be hysterical, but how much of this information will reach the average person in the street? Because I don't think they're going to cover this revelation of this information anywhere close to how they were covering the lies that they were telling and the case that they were making, because they were actually trying to commit a coup. You know, they had the CIA, the FBI, and a lot of people in the Justice Department, and it was designed one thing, to destroy Trump. So it's amazing he has survived this far, but actually he still has a way to go, because this information has to get out. But it is a big story, and it satisfies a lot of people who have known this was true for a long time. But one of the hang-ups about this declassification occurred because the CIA director, Haspel, had something to say about it. So Haspel's not exactly a friend of the president's, and she was blocking that, but now the director of national intelligence has gotten there, and of course Trump has added to it. So hopefully this will build, and I hope there's more coverage, because our goal, of course, is to find the truth before 10 or 15 years passes and somebody digs out and say, oh, you know what they were doing back then. Some of that stuff was all based on lies. So I think it's good news that it's coming out. Let's just hope that it's interpreted in the proper way, and it's probably no accident that it has waited so long, and it will be spun in a certain direction, and I've already can see where it's spinning it, so that it's all the Republicans' fault, has nothing to do with the Democrats, and yet it looks like the Democrats have been caught at some very nasty things.
It's pretty explosive, and you would imagine in a normal world this would be plastered across the headlines, but of course we've been treated to plastered headlines for 4 years about Russiagate. Even when the Mueller report didn't produce very much, they still accused Trump of colluding with the Russians. But this declassification yesterday, and it comes on the heels of a similar declassification last week at the request of Lindsey Graham, who's done one decent thing, it appears, in his career. But this is fascinating. John Ratcliffe, the DNI, declassified former CIA Director John Brennan's handwritten notes showing that he briefed President Obama on a plan by Hillary Clinton, planning quotes, to tie then-candidate Trump, and this is July of 16, to tie then-candidate Trump to Russia, quote, as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email server. And we know what happened when they launched that plot. They went over, and we know that she hired Steele to make the Steele dossier, which turns out was an absolute pack of lies cooked up by some kooky former spook himself. That's what she did. Now listen to this. These are the handwritten notes, and I think our first clip will show a sample of his handwritten notes. Here's what Brennan, who A, is no friend of the Russians, and B, is no friend of Trump. Here's what he wrote in his notes. We're getting additional insight into Russian activities from, redacted, that's a source, site, summarizing alleged approval by Hillary Clinton, a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian security service. And he appears to have not only briefed Obama on this, but apparently, according to his notes, seemingly Susan Rice, James Comey, and Obama's own chief of staff. And one of the things that's fascinating about this is that this originated in the intelligence community, and they sent what's called an investigative lead to the FBI. Check this out. Looks like Trump's got some scandal here with the Russians. They asked Comey last week, hey, do you remember this lead that came over from the CIA? No, doesn't ring a bell, doesn't ring a bell. I wonder if he was sweating in his seat.
You know, this is pretty astounding. And I was listening to one report, and they were recognizing all these facts. And for some reason, the reporter said, yes, it is hard evidence. It shows the FBI and the CIA, and Justice Department have been involved in all this, and it looks like that's criminal activity. But it looks to them, as they were reporting it, that in Hillary's case, it was probably just the fact that she was expressing her viewpoint as part of the First Amendment. And I think, well, that is a stretch. But for some reason, this is all good. It's going to be helpful sorting all this out. But I don't think you're going to see a trial in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years and try to sort this out and see if any crimes were committed. Crimes were committed, but it's and probably the most important thing is that the truth does get out and the people hear it. But that's where the frustration is. How are we going to get it out? We can help a little bit here and there, but the propaganda machine is well along its way to spinning everything that happens in their direction. And of course, that is no matter what Trump does, it's reason to hate him even more. So hate Trump is pretty popular in this country, unfortunately.
I guess it's easier than coming up with an actual program that the American people want to vote for, right? I mean, that's kind of the old-fashioned way, come up with a better platform. But the thing is, here you have a presidential candidate, then Hillary Clinton at the time, using her deep ties into the deep state, into the intelligence community, using those ties to gin up a fake scandal tying the Trump campaign to the Russians. And you think of all kinds of violations, Hatch Act violations, on and on and on. And this is probably, so I think someone else said this is the worst dirty trick scandal in the history of the United States. To get the intelligence community to make a fake allegation, a fake news that the Trump campaign is colluding with the Russians to help detract information from your own server, which, you remember that scandal, it did kind of get buried when it was, oh my gosh, Trump, Russia. But here's what's interesting. It first started out that the Russians went to the Obama administration to expose what Hillary was doing. They're saying, hey, what are they doing? We're not part of this. This is insane. And that's why some of the claims now from the Clinton camp are, well, that whole thing then was just Russian disinformation. They were trying to, fool us. But, someone else made a good point that if the claim it's Russian disinformation really is obliterated by the fact that Brennan ran to the president, probably covering his own rear end, say, hey, Mr. President, Hillary's up to something no good over here. We better take a look at it.
I'll feel better when we have a different person at the head of the CIA.
Yeah.
Of course, the best thing in the world to have is not endorsing an organization like the CIA, because that is secret government. They can do what they want. They can cover their tracks. They have access to as much money as they want and to the power sources. So as this conspiracy was going on, it wasn't just the CIA. The FBI is involved. There's many members of Congress that is involved. The media is involved. So it's an overwhelming project, and they were able to get away with this for a long time. But I just don't see how you will ever get to the bottom of all these problems with somebody like Haspel at the head of the CIA, and that remains to be seen. People will talk about it. We heard more about that in the campaign. Lock her up, but she's not about to be locked up.
Yeah, I don't know. But you're right about Haspel. She is up to her neck in this. She was the chief of station. We talked about it last week. She was the CIA's chief of station, the top person in London while this phony Steele dossier was being cooked up. She's in the center of this, and it was reported last week that she was personally standing in the way of declassification of these documents. She's probably worried because it's getting closer and closer to her, and you're right. I mean, once again, some of Trump's biggest mistakes are hiring the absolute worst of the worst and putting them all around him and then looking around saying, gosh, I wonder why my administration is not functioning very well.
You know, as bad as she is on these issues that we're talking about, what really turned me off on her was her position on torture.
Oh, yeah.
And she was right in the middle of all that, and that was a firm, you know, philosophic belief that she had, and that's a little bit hard to, you know, adjust to. So maybe some good will come of it, and at least we're better off now than we were a week ago, you know, or even 2 days ago. This information is out, and they're literally, you know, it's directed right at Clinton, that she approved it, and there's no lying now, is there? It's just a matter of who gets to hear the truth.
Yeah, if they say anything, and we both read Jonathan Turley's excellent piece today, and we put it up on the Ron Paul Institute website as well for people to read, ronpaulinstitute.org. But he points out that, and we've said it earlier, that why is it even, and he says, look, I'm not crazy about the timing of this revelation being let out. It's awfully close to the election. Maybe it's even suspicious on the part of pro-Trump people of letting it out this time. Regardless, why is the media absolutely ignoring it as if it didn't happen? I mean, just completely. It's like the Soviet media, you know. We did not meet our 5-year plan. You know, don't report it.
Well, we're back to the principles of the First Amendment, you know, really, and there's not much left to it the way it's set up now. And then when you have the social media and the complexity of that, getting the truth is a real job. But Turley is on top of this right now and making this point and making the contradiction. Why did we hear so much about it when it was lies, and you hear nothing about it when there's a revolution
of truth?
I mean, isn't there somebody out there? Well, Jonathan Turley.
Yeah.
Because he's never been stereotyped that he's an ultra right winger or a Trump always, you know, that sort of thing.
He's moderate.
He's been very strong on an academic approach to this. So, but in spite of the shortcomings that I expressed and a little bit of concern, I still think it's good news for getting to the bottom of this. And but ultimately, I think the country has to give up on the notion of secret government, because the CIA is very, very powerful.
The bad news. Well, Trump was amped up on it this morning. He was tweeting like a guy with a double espresso. But unfortunately with Trump, there's a lot of hot air that comes out of those fingers, but you don't see a lot of action. But there is other news we want to talk about, Dr. Paul, and you brought this to my attention earlier, and I think it's really worth talking about, not only in its own context, but in the context of the kinds of people that are in the FBI. I think Americans have and hopefully they're being cured of this, but they have this idea that they're only the most honorable people. I'm sure there are many honorable people in the FBI and in the CIA as well, but there are some bad apples in that barrel. And let's look at this next clip. So there's two reasons why we're talking about this. If we have that next picture. This is Asha Rangappa, and she's talking about Trump coming home from the hospital when he's done being sick. She says, to recap, we have a biological terrorist in the White House. She's a CNN commenter, but she's also, Dr. Paul, a former FBI agent. Interesting.
So they have worked it down, you know, the word terrorist and terrorism really originated, you know, back on 9/11. So even though nobody ever really defined it and know exactly when you become a terrorist, all they had to say that, well, this is anti-terrorism, and everybody rolled over, you know, Patriot Act and everything else to stop terrorism. But here it is right now. They're just using this against the president. And what are they arguing? Oh, because he didn't get sick enough.
Yeah.
He got better. The dog, what did he do that for? You know, he should still be there sweating it out. Yeah. And, oh no, he's lying. He really wasn't ever sick. You know, on and on. There's no end to it all. But now these predictions are that because of Trump, this terrorism is going to cause death of thousands of more people. And when we put up our charts, the charts aren't even important enough to put them up anymore. Everything's down about zero, and and more people. And we have another study there showing a lot of scientists now are speaking out, and that's good because there's the enthusiasm and the belief in all these lies are just disappearing, and I think that's good.
Yeah, that is good. It's they accuse him of going to the White House to infect his own staff, as if that was his intention. I mean, he would have to be insane or extremely stupid. Hey, I'm going to go kill my staff. This sounds like a good idea. But we want to move on to something else, and this, I think, I would call this a good news story. It starts out as a bad news story, and it's a little video that's on Twitter. Let's do that first one with Cuomo and have a look at what Cuomo was saying a couple of days ago. So you can get that going. That's
situation. You know, I have to say to the Orthodox community tomorrow, if you're not willing to live with these rules, then I'm going to close the synagogues. I have had a 30-year relationship with the Orthodox community. It goes back.
He said, I'm going to shut down the synagogues. That's what he said. Well, guess what? The Orthodox Jewish community in New York is not too keen on being pushed around and kicked around. You know, they've been there, they've done that, right? And so here was their response. Let's look at this second clip, just a second of it. Here's how they responded to Cuomo saying, hey, I'm going to shut down your synagogues. They weren't taking it on the chin. What they were doing, Dr. Paul, is they all got together, they ripped off their masks, and they put them in a big bonfire. Take that, Governor Cuomo.
You know, that is great. You know, the big picture is the big principle of liberty, people not needing to suffer the consequences, which is a far stretch to lock down churches. They've been doing locking down the churches all, and now this is in New York by a governor who has done a lot of things wrong because he doesn't have the biggest idea what it means to live in a country that recognizes liberty. But once again, you could do it in the broad sense, but what about in the narrow sense? I mean, why aren't some people saying, you know, does he have a bias against Jews? You know, if that was done by others, you know, you could hear a lot of noise. But so far that isn't. And I haven't, you know, I don't watch all, but I try to find out what they're doing in the regular media. But there's not many people really condemning him, which he deserves. But hopefully that'll build, especially with the demonstration. I think the demonstration is the part that you sort of enjoy seeing.
Yeah, it was great. And in fact, I didn't show the other clip, but the sheriffs came out to try to push these Orthodox Jews out. Get home. And they surrounded them and said, shame on you, get out of here, shame on you. And they really, I mean, it was a peaceful protest in the best sense of the word, because they were protesting for their liberty, their ability to assess their own risks and behave themselves. But, you know, out on the left coast, which is, you know, as you know, where I came from, Dr. Paul, they've got a governor who, believe it or not, is even crazier than Mario Cuomo, than Governor Cuomo, not Mario, that's his father. Here, look what he put out from his governor's office yesterday. A helpful guide to Californians. Going out to eat with members of your household this weekend? Don't forget to keep your mask on between bites. With a little helpful guide. On, off, chew. I mean, this is the point. I thought it was a joke when I saw it.
Well, you know, I suggested to you, if we had a real good comedian, could they make a good video of this and trying to eat and doing what he says? But they do it. You know, you wonder, I know they have several goals. One is chaos, and one to attack people that don't deserve it, just to get people upset. But they were over the top now. They're not upsetting people. It's almost entertainment now. It's so bad. But if you're on the receiving end of something like this, because, you know, we've had some Christian churches closed down too, and ministers arrested, and you can't even sing hymns in their parking lot, and all these things. So, yeah, there is a reaction now, and as people realize as time goes on that this is maybe not quite as dangerous as they said, and if you follow the rules, maybe you can handle, you know, the danger like they do for everything else, all kinds of diseases and different things. They're able to do it, and they right now, I think the people are becoming less fearful. And then if you have a president that said, you know, well, why don't we just tone it down a little bit? Why do we have to be so frightened? Being frightened and scared isn't helpful. Actually, it's pretty good advice. It isn't like he said, of course, yesterday when we talked about it, we said, well, maybe you could have advice. You have to use common sense and all, but it doesn't mean that you have to have lockdown on this and go along with this and be terrorized, because everything the people are accepting, and they're over the top. Now, if they accept this, like the Orthodox Jews aren't going to accept it. So there is a limit to do this. Maybe this eating will be a limit, but it is so harmful. And you talk about terrorism and all these things. Just think of the people who are suffering the consequences. What if somebody didn't get their medical treatment? What if somebody lost their job? What if the kids can't be taken care of? What if they're sent off to school? It still gets to me when I see, especially people 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, marching off with a mask. I mean, it is so damaging. It's submitting to the state. It's a submission to the authority that deserve no authority. They should be protecting our liberties, not systematically destroying it. They have it upside down. If we're going to have a state, the state should be there to protect our liberties. People are supposed to take care of themselves and make their own judgments. And it isn't like people say, oh, there would be no help. Nobody will take care of anybody if you have your way. Well, no, there'll be somebody else. Every time you say there wouldn't be a government regulation, maybe there's another way you regulate. Maybe common sense would do it. Maybe private owners would do it. There's all kinds of ways you can have regulations other than the bureaucrat who loves to regulate. Yeah. And then you get people like Fauci in charge of all this. And so far, he doesn't look like he's going away yet. No, so, no. But people hopefully aren't listening to him quite as much.
There are a lot of different kinds of eaters, and some people are kind of messy eaters. So you can imagine how gross it would be to have this thing on your face if you're kind of a messy eater and you got all this food and stuff. No wonder people are getting all kinds of weird infections and stuff. But we almost got into a little trouble a couple weeks ago because YouTube says don't criticize the WHO or you're going to be on our bad side. Well, this is interesting then. We're actually not going to criticize them. We're going to say, there's some interesting consequences. The WHO, and you talked about it just a couple of days ago, they have said that 10% of the world's population is, according to their estimates, infected with the coronavirus, with the COVID-19, with the virus that causes COVID-19. And as you pointed out, that's over 700 and some million people. Well, if you do the math according to the WHO's own numbers, that means about 0.1% death rate from this, from people that we know have died from it, which we think is inflated and probably is. But if you just do the math, that's about 0.14, something like that percent, I think I saw, which is on par with the bad flu season. So by the WHO's own numbers, we're seeing something different. And interestingly enough, when Trump pointed that out, which is just objectively true, it's their own numbers, they took down his post on Facebook. They literally took down Trump's post for pointing out that, okay, according to the WHO's own numbers, this is about like a bad flu season, so you can't win.
Right. There's one other article I want to make a point. We sort of alluded to it, but this has to do with a declaration signed titled the Great Barrington Declaration. Yeah. And they have 44,000 signatures, and this is by scientists. This is not just street people signing up. These are people supposed to have thought about this issue, and their point they're making is they want to go for natural herd immunity, so that people, so the natural process of how communities deal with this, how nature deals with this, and this doesn't rule out taking vaccine. This doesn't say you can't have vaccines. Yeah. I mean, I'm skittish about vaccines, but this is nowhere do you say it. And I'm not that way. I would never outlaw vaccines. I would try to advise people to the best of their ability, but to allow it to be a government function and government authority and government money. And then if you don't do it, you can be in big trouble. People are going to lose their jobs at the rate we're going because they don't have that inoculation and your passport under your skin. That is a trend that I think is real. And even the other day, Gates has not budged from that position. He is adamant on the control of people and people's movement. So we have a long way to go to try to get the coronavirus behind us and think about how our country should be free in dealing with problems like this.
Yeah, and in fact, we have a picture. This is a piece from the Times of London about this declaration. Lift coronavirus curbs and go for herd immunity, urges coalition of scientists. And actually, this is spearheaded, Dr. Paul, by one of the scientists we've been talking about several times, Dr. Gupta from Oxford University. She and her colleagues, who thankfully it appears have a relationship with Atlas in the White House, are talking about the need to do what we've always done. And it's I guess thousands of scientists have signed it, tens of thousands of average citizens have signed it, and it's really becoming a big deal. But here's the interesting thing. Governments, and I remember you always teach this, governments are often behind the people, behind, several steps behind the popular thing. The UK government, I think, has gone completely nuts. They've completely locked down again, even though there is no increase in death. It's a case-demic that's happening there. But look at this. I think if you want to talk about terrorism, this next clip, this literally is terrorism. Matt Hancock is the Minister of Health in the government in the UK. Matt Hancock warns cancer patients will only be treated if COVID-19 stays under control. So you're sitting there with your cancer, you literally are dying to be treated. And he's saying, hey, sorry, you guys didn't do enough to lock down. You didn't put your mask on. Go ahead and go die. I mean, this is sick.
And what will be added to that is if you don't take the inoculation, if you don't take the vaccine, or you're not going to get jobs, you're not going to get in college, you won't get your driver's license. This will be it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't sound good. Do you have a closing
I just have a closing reminder. I haven't done this in a couple of days. This is Dr. Paul's new mini book, The End of Unearned Opulence. We'll put a link in the description when the show's over on how you can get your own copy as a thank you for helping support this show, for helping support the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity with a contribution. $50 or more will give you a book. For $100 or more, Dr. Paul will hand sign it. His hands are in pain right now because he's been signing so many. And in fact, Dr. Paul, we've had to bring on some extra help to help us get these mailed. We're doing our best. We've got a big batch going out today, so please be patient. But the demand is through the roof. Everyone wants to read what you're writing about this.
Very good, and thank you. And I want to follow up, Daniel, on the point you were making that sometimes the politicians are behind what the people are thinking. And I found out that was true with my experience of the position I had early on about the fallacy of the drug laws as if they were good. Coercion is not the way to do it. Prohibition of alcohol was insane. And that I took a position, very clearly, even in the 80s, and it was controversial. The district I represented, it was in the Bible Belt, and probably if you did a poll, probably 85% of the people would say, yeah, you have to have these drug laws. But I took the position that the drug laws were a detriment. And even to my own surprise, it never hurt me like most people said, and the members of Congress were so skittish about it, and we'd have token votes in the Congress, and it wasn't for legalization totally, but it was moving away from the harshness of the laws. And so many of them would never vote for a little bit because they were convinced that the people want these laws. The people in my district wouldn't understand, and therefore we have to do it. And I finally concluded that there for a while I said, now that it's really out, they've identified me as a libertarian, I'll never get reelected to Congress and this sort of thing. But it never happened. And what dawned on me was that the people were way ahead of us, even to the extent that I believed it, that the people were sick and tired of the laws. They probably all had somebody hurt by the excessiveness of the laws, for kids getting into trouble with marijuana and things like that. So there was a lot more sympathy for that. And I think that's true generally about liberty, because they've been conditioned and they're afraid to take a stand. And it turns out that if you have the option or explain that it isn't the end of the world if you allow individuals to deal with these problems. And why wait until everybody agrees prohibition doesn't work? Look at the harm done with the prohibition of alcohol. Yes, we still have an alcohol problem. We have a drug problem. All this, but we're not killing as many people. We're not putting tens of thousands of people in prison for minor offenses, but we're still breaking down doors, with, looking for drugs. We haven't eliminated all that. But I think the people, even the people who don't want to talk about this, just because they have seen the harm of this. So people need to realize that they shouldn't be intimidated and frightened about the concept, maybe the people and maybe individuals could sort of protect themselves and understand more about nutrition, and maybe that's a better way. Maybe the government fibs to us. Maybe something in people who are in business with the government making money with vaccines and drugs and all these things. Yeah, that's a possibility, and they'll wake up. So I think what we need is more boldness for people to speak out, and fortunately I felt that many people, especially in the district, when they heard the explanation, they were able to accept this. And I'm optimistic. That's where I have my optimism. If the people hear the truth and you offer them liberty, they're going to pick that over the authoritarians. And right now, when the authoritarians are telling us that if you don't do what we're telling you, we're going to lock down your synagogues and you will have to eat with a mask on, all the crazy stuff. So we're in a position where all we have to do is tell them the truth. And I think that will boost us in our effort to restore liberty to this country. I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.